All right, thanks. Well, why don't we'll slowly work our way in, and as folks join, we'll bring them into the space as well. So welcome to the Environmental Justice Coalition, part of the Clark County Climate Change Planning Process, August 5th, 3:30 till 6:30 on Zoom. So just really grateful to welcome folks into the space. Let's do a roll call and welcoming, and then we'll move our way in. So we go next slide. Monica, you got your hand raised already? You raised your hand, you're in the room, jump in.
We need to admit
yeah.
Monica, that's why
Okay,
the
got it.
hand raised.
Oh. All right. You're admitted, Monica. We've officially allowed you to join us, so thank you. I can see you over there. So just as a recognition, the Climate Commitment Act is helping to fund and support this work. If we go next slide, we'll move into our official welcome. And so I'll just walk through some, actually, I'll do some meeting logistics in a minute. Let's keep moving people in. Let's do introductions, roll call. I'll start with the folks on my screen. So Tui, I'm going to start with you. Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Thuy Nguyen. I'm filling in from Minh Pham for the Vietnamese Community Association to join the webinar today.
Great.
Thank you
Well,
for having me.
we're glad to have you. Monica, when you're done moving your iPad around, we'll unmute you, bring you in.
Hi, I'm Monica Zazueta. Do I go on yours, mine?
Just
Okay,
say that.
sorry. My name is Monica Zazueta, she, her pronouns. I am with Vancouver Metro LULAC, Council number 47026. And I am for all humanity thriving. So thank you for being here, everyone.
Thanks, Monica. Tavi, I see your note. Rebecca?
Hi, everybody. I'm with the Free Clinic of Southwest Washington.
Thank you. And her name's Rebecca. Good. Paris?
Hey y'all, my name's Paris Nelson. I'm here standing in place of Almendra, my colleague. I'm the Strategic Development Policy Manager at Fourth Claim Forward. Happy to be here.
Great, thank you. Anna?
Hello, everyone. Ana Karen Betancourt Macias, she, her, ella. I am with Latino Leadership Northwest, EJC. Happy to be here.
Great, thank you. Jude?
Hi, Jude here with the Food and Farm Justice Network. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh?
Good afternoon, folks. Josh Jones, Partners in Careers. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Tavi?
Hi, Tavi Kale with Ironman Team.
Welcome. Gabriella?
Hello, everyone. This is Gabriela Mendoza Ewing with Hispanic Disability Support of Southwest Washington. Great to see you.
All right, thank you. Alana, I know you said you were home with your kids, but you want to say hello or?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alana Tudela. I'm with the Pacific Islander Health Board of Washington. And I was wondering if you guys are able to promote Rosalind Leon Guerrero. She's coming in for Angela Williams for PICA.
Alana, you can't see, but Roz is in the room with us. So Roz, say hello, please.
Hafa Roz Leon Guerrero. I'm the Director of Community Services with the Pacific Islander Community Association of Washington.
Great.
Good afternoon.
Great, good afternoon. So I think we got our EJC members. Did I miss any EJC members?
I'm gonna pop in. I'm Abby with Odyssey
Oh,
World.
yeah. There you are, Abby. Sorry, you blended right into the middle of my screen there. So let's introduce just if you go to the next slide, I can introduce some of the staff teams. Just a reminder. Well, is that the next slide? Clark County. So we have just a reminder of who you have. But we have Jenna. Do you want to say hello real quick?
Hi, everyone. Jenna Kay with Clark County Community Planning. Nice to see you all.
Thank you, Amy.
Hello, I'm Amy Koski with Clark County Public Health. Good to be here.
Great. Harrison.
Hi, everyone. My name is Harrison Houston. I'm with Clark County's community planning as well.
Great, thank you. Tracy.
Hi, everyone. Tracy Lunsford. I'm with Parametrics on the
Okay.
consultant team.
My colleague, Nicole. Nicole's smiling, so I'll just acknowledge that Nicole is, there you are, smiling.
I'm so sorry I was muted. Nice to see everybody. Sorry about that.
Right. Thank you. And then Maria.
Hi, everyone. Maria with Kearns and West.
Great, thank you. So just a couple of notes before we dive in. So I do, we want to remind folks, as we move through, you did receive all your information in the packet. The Otter AI, I think we've had this conversation a couple times. So if that is you, we need to take that off. So I'll just remind folks that that's something we cannot use in this setting. So please, if that's you, I don't even know how to talk about Otter AI. Turn it off, I guess, disable it, whatever the nomenclature is. But before I keep going through, Jenna, did you want to offer any opening remarks?
No, just welcome everyone and thanks for being here.
Okay, great. All right, well, let's keep moving through the slides. I'll do the housekeeping and then we'll move into project updates. So if we go next slide. So today we're going to do a couple things. So we are going to reflect back in a little different way than we have been. So we'll create some space today where our Clark County staff will reflect on what they've received from you all and really reflect on some of the learnings from the public engagement work that you all have done. And then we're going to flip the script a little bit on how we've been getting feedback on the engagement process. So we got Tracy here once again to discuss the greenhouse gas sub-element. And what we've done in the past is really ask folks electronically to give input. And today we're going to try something different where we're really going to do in live, in a live version of giving feedback on the type of questions, pulling some concepts from the equity and environmental justice lens that you all did some work on, and really try to make sure that we come out of today's conversation with you all feeling like the questions that we're asking and the way that we're framing those questions would work for all of our different communities in the room. I also wanted, we were going to use some breakout rooms, so I'll just preemptively say our technology mode of Zoom today does not allow for breakout rooms. And so we're going to be doing this as an entire group. And I'll say just a couple things about that. One, that it was really our goal to use breakouts to ensure that every single person in this environmental justice coalition would be able to contribute to that conversation. So I'm going to ask folks, particularly those of you who tend to be more quiet, to really engage and come into the conversation. But I'm also going to warn you that if I haven't heard from you, I might call on you and invite you into the space. It's really critical that we really hear from you, but also that you're giving input and reflecting back how we have these conversations with the communities that you all are part of and experts in. So that's a trauma-informed way of saying I might call on you. I know that can be very difficult for folks, so just know that that might come later in the agenda. We can keep going to the next slide. And then how we're going to spend our time today, we will hear from the team on kind of broader project updates. As we've created space in every one of our agendas, we'll have some room for EJC members to provide some announcements for your colleagues around the table. Clark County will provide some reflection on engagement and really offer some space also for you all to add additional context, anything that's missing, anything that you want to lift up and highlight from the great work that you all have been doing. We will build in a break. And then, as I previewed, we'll have an outreach conversation. And really, this will be an opportunity for us to kind of collectively work together to kind of frame and ensure that the way that we're asking for feedback from the different communities you work with is going to be most effective. As always, and for folks in the audience, right around 6:10 or so, we will create space for public input to the EJC on the project and work that they're doing, and we'll get you out of here by 6:30. So any questions on our agenda for today? Not seeing any, we can go to the next slide. And just as a reminder, the Environmental Justice Coalition members are joined as panelists. Members of the public, you are joining as attendees. So the only space that we have for members of the public to engage will be in that public comment period, but we're glad you're here listening into the conversations. We will ask that folks stay on mute when you're not contributing. We ask that to the extent possible, you join by video, both for our audience to see everyone's beautiful faces, but also just to create the feeling of being in community together. Monica and Chris are both modeling, raising hands when they'd like to get in the queue. So I will come to you all. If you are on the phone at any point in time, you can press *9 to raise your hand, *6 to unmute. Technical issues, I saw Maria put her email in the chat. Please email Maria if you're having any problems kind of navigating our technical issues. We do ask that folks update. It looks like most folks have with their name, pronouns, if you choose to use those in the chat. And we'll ask that you move around and take care of yourself, drink water, all the healthy things. I should also say, as a reminder, and for the record, my name is Ben Duncan with Kearns West, your facilitator. Monica, you have your hand up. Jump in. I can't hear you. Amy, you might have to unmute to hear Monica. Or maybe I had to ask to unmute. Try now. Nope, still can't hear you.
Yeah, I'll just come back to you.
We're having more technical difficulties.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone. So on the slide before, when you asked if there was any questions, I was trying to figure out how to how to get my thing going. But I would love to maybe all of this is great. Thank you for the agenda. But also, if we could have some time, maybe future or maybe today, for like any concerns that anyone's having in the EJC or any resources or any ideas to get more engagement, or just what's going on, what they've been learning out there in the world. I would really love to just get more of knowledge from all the different groups and what they're having troubles with, or for me, it's the hierarchy and human value thing that I'm trying to learn how to speak in all the spaces. And so it was just a thought that I had for future meetings.
That's great, Monica. And some of that can be built in today. So as we reflect back and the county team reflects back on what we've heard, certainly I would offer folks, if there's lessons that you're learning as you're doing this work, or things that have worked really well, or things that have been challenged, I just encourage people to bring it into this space. Thanks for naming that.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Okay, let's keep going through a little more housekeeping and I'm going to pass it on. So again, raise hand button on the bottom of your screen is available. We do have closed captions. There's a CC button on the bottom of your screen if that's helpful for your participation. We've been here before. You all know how to use it. But if you have questions, again, you can throw it in the chat or email Maria. Let's go to the next slide. And then again, I won't spend much time on this. What I will ask that folks particularly pay attention to bringing conversations into the room and not using chat exorbitantly for commentary. So just really sit with that, and then just really sharing space. I'm going to encourage folks, if you're always the first person to raise your hand, maybe take a moment, take a breath. If you're someone who doesn't come into the conversation, please push yourself, not into anxiety zone, but into that growth zone and jump into the space. So really, I'm going to encourage folks to really spread the wealth, spread the love today as we go through the conversation. Next slide. And then I will ask now, and I'll ask this again, if you are in the audience, which I'm not seeing anybody as an attendee, you can raise your hand. So I'll be really quick because I don't see anybody out there, but we'll do another call later during the public comment period. If folks join, we're gonna just keep an eye out. If more attendees join, we can put the comments in the comp plan comment portal there later on. Go next slide. And then hopefully folks had the chance to reflect on the EJC meeting number 6 meeting summary. I'll just ask if there's any edits that folks have to our meeting 6 summary. So raise your hand and offer those. Not seeing any hands raised. If folks could give a thumbs up, hands up, aye, some mechanism to say that you approve of the meeting 6 summary. Alana, I see a hand, Paris hand, Monica thumbs up. Thank you, Rebecca, Gabriella. Okay, any others want to weigh in? Not seeing any edits. Let's keep going. Meeting 6 approved. Next slide. Okay, Shanna, pass it to you. Thank you.
All right. Hello again, everyone. This is Jenna. I'm just going to run through my miscellaneous project updates for you all. So first off, a couple things about in your meeting materials for today. You may have seen we had a new batch of comments that have come in since the last meeting from other EJC members. So that's there for you to take a look at if you would like. And similarly, we had a few public comments that have come in since the last meeting. So those are also part of your meeting materials. Also in your meeting materials, we did post at the bottom, just as an additional background item there, as follow-up to last month's meeting. We have a copy of the full greenhouse gas inventory report that we posted that had just more detail than the key highlights that we talked about at your last meeting. So that is there for reference if it's helpful. If it's more detail than you want, no need to look at it. But if it is of interest to you, feel free to take a look, share it with others, or use it, for your own organization's purposes as well. So just wanted to flag that that was there in your meeting packet. And then wanted to touch base on just sort of the different phases of public engagement. We're going to talk more about this later on in today's meeting, but for those of you who had phase 1 engagement activities, if you haven't submitted your invoices or progress reports for all of that work, please make sure you get that in to Lauren, Amy, and I as soon as you can. We are trying to wrap up that phase of work. For phase 2 and phase 3 engagement activities, those questions are now available for you all to be using. I know a lot of you have already started on your work for those phases of work. And Lauren, Amy, and I just wanted to remind you all that we are available to chat if you want to talk about what you're planning. If you want help shortening the surveys, we know there's been interest in keeping them short, and we have struggled to keep keep it short. So, but we have some ideas on how to shorten, if that's of interest to you, to make it more accessible to your community. And then also, we're turning it into discussion questions, things like that. So please reach out to Lauren, Amy, and I if that's of interest. And then around the phase 3 questions, we sent out the translated versions just this past Friday. So for those of you who like to review the translations to make sure that they make sense, please take a look at those in the next week and send us any suggested edits by August 12th. That would be super helpful, so we can then incorporate your edits and share them with the rest of the EJC. Let's see, other updates. We met with our other advisory group, the Community Advisory Group, in late July for their July meeting. And they had a similar meeting to you all in getting an update on our greenhouse gas inventory and giving us a little bit more. We needed to close the loop with them on a few things related to some possible draft resilience policies. So just wanted to give the update that we are now taking the draft list of resilience policies that group has put forward and doing some more analysis on those. And then we'll bring those back to you all in the next couple of months to weigh in on further. So while we're still focused on greenhouse gases today, just wanted to let you know, we will come back to resilience this fall based on the building on the work that that other group has done. And then my last update is that we are not going to meet in September. So no September EJC meeting. It overlaps with Labor Day and the start of school. So it seemed like a good month to take off. So after today's meeting, we will next meet in October. Okay, that is all I have.
Okay, thanks. Any questions? Okay, not hearing any questions for Jenna. Thank you, Jenna. Let's move to EJC announcements. So again, this is part of our agenda we added per y'all's feedback to ensure that you had space to make announcements for your colleagues. So I'll just open up the floor. What are y'all spotlighting me? Anna, jump in.
I was first today. So this is an event that we have outside of LMW. I'm also a community organizer outside of work, and we're hosting a night market on August 24th. We're gearing it more towards adults rather than family friendly. So if y'all, if y'all want to come out and set a table to for the surveys, I'm more than happy to provide a space for folks. But yeah, that's my event that I'm having on the 24th.
All right, thank you. Roz?
Hi, Hoffa Day. Just wanted to share that we are in collaboration with the Pacific Islander Health Board of Washington. We have upcoming events in September. On September 5th, we are going to conduct we're going to conduct the surveys to our Pacific Islander youth. And then on September 13th, we are going to conduct the survey with our Pacific Islander community leaders in Southwest Washington. And on the 14th, we will have a fair, kind of like a post-back to school event. But at the event, we're going to have a focus group discussion from 10 to 12. We are going to have, I believe Alana and Angela were working with, or will be working with Lauren and Amy to come out and facilitate that focus group discussion. And then from 1 to 4, we will have some events. We have DSHS coming out, the Department of Licensing coming out. And I'm going to kick it to Alana because her and Angela have been working very, very closely on these events.
Thank you, Roz. Alana, you just got called out. My friend, jump in.
I know, and I'm trying to look for my notes when we had met. But yes, we will be, during our event, we do plan on having our PI communities come out, and we will be passing out some back to school supplies for our middle school to high school students. And if there are some elementary school students who are not able to gather any school supplies, then we will be having that too. And we will also have backpacks for our youth. And one second, I know. And during our discussion, for our youth, for our youth discussion group, we do plan on we are looking at over 30 youth to come in, and we are planning to make it more interactive for them, like having a scavenger hunt that is related to environmental justice. And then we do plan on having them tell us and to make if I'm not mistaken, like a slideshow on what environmental justice means to them. So I'm pretty excited. We get to involve our youth, and we are looking at over 30 youth to come to our event on Thursday, on September 5th. And then on our back to school event, we're hoping to at least gather 40 community members for our focus groups. And we will be conducting our surveys as well during the entire duration of the event.
Alana failed to mention that we're also going to put up like those flip chart papers with the questions on the flip chart paper so people can just jot down too. So if they miss filling out a paper survey, we'll capture their feedback through that as well. Wanted to make it as interactive. And the last thing she didn't mention is we are going to give youth a plant, something on the environment and how to nurture the environment. So we thought that rather than just having one discussion, we're going to give them something to plant a seed on, or whatever they choose, and they will nurture that, and then we will revisit regularly. So we're looking at my team is looking at monthly. That way we can keep the youth engaged and involved.
That's terrific. Well, good teamwork, you two, on that engagement announcements. Thank you. It's very exciting. Abby?
Yeah, so later this month, I think August 15th, we're Odyssey World and Fourth Playing Forward are collaborating to do a listening party at the Commons for our Women's Mosaic episode we did that was focused on environmental justice. So we had Desiree Helligers, who's the WSU Vancouver, what is it? CSEJ, I can't forget what it stands for.
Social and Environmental Justice.
Thank you, Ben. She was our guest. She gave some really good information on climate justice and the CEI hub and climate resistance in Vancouver. And so that's a two-part episode that we're going to take segments from and then play them and then have a group discussion centered around kind of the survey questions and also what she talked about in the episode. So that'll be definitely a really good event coming up as well.
Just side note, Dr. Helligers was my supervisor 20 years ago when I did AmeriCorps at the Center for Social and Environmental Justice. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, it all comes full circle. Monica,
she's the best.
She's great. Yeah, Monica, jump in.
Thank you. So yes, I actually had some questions about the scavenger hunt. Is that just for the Pacific Islander community, or are all nationalities and colors welcome?
All ethnic backgrounds. We do not turn anyone away. We welcome everyone who attends our events.
That's amazing. Thank you. And so I will bring my kiddos there. And then, and I just love your idea of giving the kiddos a plan and keeping on coming back. Also, Abby, what time on August 15th?
Let me check my calendar. I think it's, oh no, I went into September. From 5:30 to 6:30.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, no, that was my thing. All right. All right. Oh no, what did I do? Okay. All right. So with my thing, since we're not having a meeting in September, I'll share mine now. It's the Collaboration, Connection, and Caring event. It's where we come together and we sit in a circle and we talk about stories of awe that in our life, or we talk about stories of humor, and we get to know each other on a different level rather than politics or climate for that section. We just get to laugh and enjoy each other's stories. So I'm trying to bring gathering the energy together. Then next is going to be the introduction to donut economics, where every human being can thrive within the means of our planetary boundaries. And then after that, it's going to be Create Through Art, where I gathered all of the pictures that have been drawn by kiddos, by other community members, and they're so cool. I'm like, wow, like this is what other people are seeing in their minds. So I really encourage people to draw if they're they don't want to do the survey. But also there's going to be a chance to do the surveys. Free food during the whole event. It's there when you walk in, so you get to eat whenever you want, and then music and dancing at the end. And this is September 7th at the Fourth Playing Forward Commons from 11 a.m. until 3 p.m. And there's gonna be translation in Spanish and Chuquis. So if you have any more questions, just email me, and I would be happy to have a talk. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Monica. Gabriella.
Yes, thank you. My internet is kind of choppy, so hopefully you can hear me.
You
Can
sound
hear-
great.
Okay, thanks. Sometimes you get a little cut out. I want to share that, I'm checking my calendar really quick. We'll have a community engagement on the week of the 19th, and we're still deciding in which day, depending on the location, the disposition of the location and the time, but it will be on the week of the 19th. And we're pairing that event with backpacks for children in need in our community. And we'll have some fun time, games for the children and food, and it's gonna be fun. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Let's hold a little bit more space. I see folks posted in the chat around some of the flyers coming up. Jude, I was just going to put you on the spot, but I saw your camera on, so maybe you can put yourself on the spot. I know you wanted to share some things.
On the spot. Well, I've been advised to bring this up in the announcements. And what I'm interested in is kind of a multi-sector discussion around food justice. So rather than, because we don't have space in our agenda at the EJC meetings, but a more synthesized conversation that we might have as each of you connect around food and food justice in your communities. It's not necessarily your primary mission and what you present here, but it's part of the cultural context that we're all in. And I think food security is a really big issue in all of your communities. And so in terms of being, really like responsive to that and bringing that kind of information back to our network of farmers who may not know you exist even, then so it's a separate meeting that I'm proposing. It would change our work plan, so it has to have county approval and some county support, and I assume because it would be optional for you to participate as members of the EJC. And I think because there might be a quorum, like even Juneteenth, it was a public announcement, so I assume that would be part of it. But since we're all part of this public process, that shouldn't, we've already crossed that bridge, and that what we say is sort of public information. So anyway, I'd love to get some feedback from you, whether you'd be interested in that, and I can make some kind of a participatory process for us to agree on the agenda or have some input in that as well. So anyway.
That's great. Jenna, did you want to add anything just like logistically and or procedurally? And then I'll just to Jude's question, just kind of ask folks, would you be interested? And then what's the next steps for the group to be able to come together and have a conversation around food justice as a kind of intersectional issue that touches all the communities around the table. So Jenna, do you want to just procedurally talk about how this would unfold?
Sure, and I think Jude covered sort of the key points. I think if a lot of folks in this group were interested, we would just post like we did for Juneteenth, that a quorum of the group may be meeting. And anyway, so we'd take care of that noticing on the county to cover our public noticing needs. And yeah, but I think my understanding is, Jude's interested in gauging interest from this group on doing that, and then we would support Jude and Patricia in the next steps on planning for that to happen.
Perfect. So just reminding folks, thank you, Jude, thank you, Jenna, just around the establishing quorum and public meeting laws. So you covered all those boundaries. So just to Jude's question, would folks be interested? and convening and coming together to have a conversation around food justice. So you can either come off mute, raise your hand, give some indication of level of interest. Monica, I see a thumbs up. Gabriella, hands up. Okay. Yep, Rebecca. Abby, yep, hands are being raised, Jude. I keep seeing people moving around as hands are raised. So, so then as the next step, so is that Jude maybe working with Jenna, Amy and team to kind of get some kind of message out? And then Jude, I know you offered to do some co-creation around what the agenda might look like, but how do we share this type of information and actually do the coordination? So Jenna, maybe that's a you question around what's the best way. Jude kind of send you information and you kind of send it to the group, and yeah, why don't you explain it so I don't have to say it out loud?
Yeah, we will be in the awkward phase of one-way communication to like out to the group. So we can work with Jude on invitation or things to send out to the group to get feedback on. Yeah, but can make sure that any information on either feedback on the agenda or you know, when and where and all those types of details, the county can help support to make sure we're being consistent with our open public meetings law. So
yeah, I was just gonna ask, like, just as a potential question, so if it's less than a quorum, like if someone, you know, said, oh, I would really like to help Jude help organize this, a smaller group could get together to help organize and structure it, as long as it's not kind of communicated across the entire body nor establish a quorum at any point. Is that accurate, Jenna?
yes, that is accurate.
Okay, so Jude, do you know what your next steps are? You got an interested group of community folk?
Yeah, I believe so. And I do understand now that I can't reply all to anything. I reply to the county and the consultants, and then they relay it however they see fit and back and forth. So I understand that. So yeah, it'd be best for me to articulate what I'm talking about in short form for everyone to like review and say, we'll have input or we won't have input, but we'll send someone or something like that.
Yep. All right, really cool. Well, thanks for bringing it into the space and your creative thinking, and for folks being supportive of your colleague around the table. Any other announcements for today's purposes? Okay, well, not seeing any, we will go to a reflection on engagement. So this will be an opportunity for the county to reflect back. Y'all have done a bunch of great work. You've submitted some reflections on what you've learned. The county's going to reflect back, and then we have some questions just to make sure that, you know, what they're reflecting back is what you all have heard. And then I think to Monica's points earlier, if there are things, lessons learned, or things that you've been really excited about that worked well, this could also be a time just to bring those into the room as well. So Jenna, I think you're going to kick us off on this.
All right. Sorry, I'm talking so much today. I'm almost done. And then you all will have lots of time. So can we do the next slide? All right, so this slide may look familiar to you all. We looked at it way back towards the beginning of the project and just wanted to revisit to set some context for some of the additional conversations we're going to have today. So as you may recall, this is a diagram that shows the overall decision-making process for this project. And we are approaching a really key point this fall with all of you, that in November and December, where you all as the EJC are going to help us review possible policy ideas using the equity lens. And as part of doing that, we are really hoping that all of the feedback you receive through your engagement activities, that we can use that as part of that discussion, right? When we're asking ourselves those equity lens questions on, well, what are we hearing from the community and things like that, that we have all of this feedback that you all have collected that we can look to and say, okay, well, what did our community say? So that's coming up really soon and is a really key point in the process, right? Because it's a good checkpoint for us to make sure, hey, are these possible policies that are moving forward improving equity or not? And if not, how might they? So that's coming up. And so we're really interested at this point in starting to look back at what we've compiled so far from everyone's engagement work so far to date. And so let's see. So I'm gonna go back to my notes to make sure I'm saying the key things I wanted to say. Okay, so today for this reflection on engagement phase, we wanted to look back at the feedback that's come through on phase 1 and summarize back what we think we're seeing in the data and the feedback and check that with all of you to see if it sounds right based on the feedback you heard from those that you've been engaging with. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this one also may look familiar. We looked at it early on in the process and you all designed your work plans in coordination with this public engagement framework. So we are gonna spend some time looking back at the feedback received so far on phase 1, which is around climate impacts and impacts people have experienced from severe weather events in the past. So that's what we'll be discussing in more detail in a moment. But just as a reminder, phase 2 is we had questions around providing some feedback on possible resilience goals and policies. Phase 3 is around collecting feedback on priorities related to greenhouse gas reduction. And phase 4 is around additional feedback on greenhouse gas reduction goals and policies. Okay, so this is just refresher and background before we reflect back on phase 1. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so as you all may recall, the batch of phase 1 engagement questions, a lot of them were asking things like, well, how have you been impacted in the past here in Clark County by various types of severe weather? So I wanna share back the key things that stood out to us staff as we've looked at the feedback that's come through, as we've read through your progress reports and you've called out themes in there, and just then double check with you all if we're missing anything. So I'm gonna read through this in a moment. You can also find this in your meeting materials. We have an updated summary of the phase 1 engagement. So this is based off of that, the summary report that's in your meeting materials. But before I do that, I just want to quickly reflect and say, we have heard from all of your work, plus a few county engagement activities. We've heard from more than 500 people through more than 24 events. Those numbers are going to go up too once we have the final count on everything. And so that's a lot of people. And you all have produced a really high percentage of that. I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but a lot of that is from all of your engagement. Okay, so we asked community members questions around sharing their past experiences with severe weather impacts. So here are some of the key things that have stood out to us as we've looked through that feedback. There's some people who've said they've had no impacts in the past from severe weather, but a lot of people shared issues that they have had. So smoky air is standing out as a common concern and issue people have had, particularly related to physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual health, as well as disruption to jobs, school, and childcare. For the houseless community members who provided feedback, extreme cold weather has caused the most hardship for them. For really hot or really cold weather, many community members have struggled to stay safe or comfortable, have experienced impacts to health, higher energy bills, disruption to jobs and income, school or childcare, disruption to transportation or access to essential services. There's been damage to trees, vegetation, or crops. And one specific example of many was we had some community members noted, for instance, running out of groceries when the roads weren't cleared fast enough, in the most recent snowstorm, for instance. When we look across the multiple climate hazards, there's some common types of disruption that we noted. A lot of people mentioned power outages, downed trees, needing to stay home because they couldn't leave, or conversely, needing to leave home because it wasn't safe to stay. A lot of people had to cancel regular outdoor activities or had damage to property or transportation routes, and there was disruption to jobs, school, or childcare. And we had some youth participants specifically call out, the mental health impacts of missing school. And we had families identifying, impacts to childcare, or when their childcare was disrupted, it meant they couldn't work and things like that. Also across, many different types of severe weather, people raise the financial impacts, things from the expenses associated with purchasing air conditioners to the expenses of repairing property or the loss of, food crops, things like that. And a lot of people called out that when severe weather disrupted their ability to work, it made other financial burdens worse, right? So it stressed other financial hardship. Some people shared stories of people in their families who are more sensitive to certain types of severe weather due to health conditions. So things like asthma, allergies, and intellectual developmental disabilities were mentioned a lot. And then people also mentioned age, either older adults or infants were often highlighted as examples, as well as being particularly sensitive. And then there were examples where people identified members of the family who were particularly exposed to different severe weather. So people people without shelter, as well as people who work outside, being more exposed to severe weather. A lot of people identified day-to-day challenges that can make it harder to cope when there is severe weather. So that included things like existing health conditions or disabilities, difficulty finding shelter when houseless, difficulty paying for housing, food, or energy bills, particularly for heat or air conditioning, lack of air conditioning where they live, lack of trees or shade in their neighborhood, same with other parks and green space, and limited or no access to car or public transportation. And again, we got a lot of specific examples of this, but just one to share is there were multiple people who mentioned the inability to install heating or cooling in some rented units in the county. And sometimes when you can do that, people can't afford to run the heating or cooling because it's cost prohibitive. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so people also noted that there are places in our community that have generally fewer resources and therefore have a harder time coping with severe weather. So this includes areas like medically underserved areas, lower income neighborhoods, as well as mobile home parks. And we had people identify past decisions related to our BIPOC communities that make their communities more vulnerable today. So for instance, we had an example provided on the history of redlining in Portland and Vancouver that has impacted housing and neighborhood options for African Americans and has had intergenerational impacts, right, on the environment and the quality of life in current neighborhoods, such as access to affordable housing, nearby amenities, and access and proximity to things like walkways. There were some specific challenges identified by our houseless community members, including lack of warming and cooling shelters, and then also difficulty getting into those or staying in them, and then general money and transportation needs as well. Specific challenges identified by people in the rural area included a lot of comments around there being less support and fewer services in the rural area compared to our urban community. There were also some specific challenges identified related to the food system. So things like impacts to food production, food access and food security, and the particular vulnerability of farmers and the actual act of farming as well, to severe weather. And let's see, we had a question in there that a lot of you asked around how prepared people felt for severe weather. And most people said they either felt somewhat prepared, not well prepared, or unsure how prepared they were, but not that many people felt very well prepared. And then based on all the questions of the different climate hazards that we asked about, it seems like fewer people have experienced impacts in the past related to landslides, floods, and drought or water shortage. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, and then we also had some questions on, what did you need that you didn't have during past severe weather events? So I'll just run through these really quickly as well. So again, some people said they didn't need anything, but a lot of people identified things that they could have used. So things that stood out were more places to feel safe, access to air conditioning or air filters, or there are a lot of comments around better windows or insulation, either at their home, work, or school, better internet connection when stuck at home, lower cost energy bills or lower cost reliable power, funding assistance to access resources, better education, better communication and alerts about severe weather, safe options for refuge, both for people, pets, and livestock, just better access to resources of lots of different kinds, indoor recreation options when outdoor recreation isn't available, better forest management to help with things like early detection of forest fires, more shade, better transportation options, better water storage and water access, faster repair and clearing of roads and drainage systems, better emergency planning and practice, better access to food and shelter for houseless community members. Our houseless community members also identified some really specific shelter features that they could have used. Lots of comments on more robust food distribution system, the need for more welfare checks on our more vulnerable community members, a need for more education and access to jobs related to resilience to be better prepared, and better overall community connection. And then there's many policy ideas beyond this as well. Okay, so that's the quick snapshot on what we were seeing in all of the feedback that has come through so far. And if we go to the next slide, our main question for you all is, what's missing? And I guess I'll pass it over to you, Ben, to help the group reflect on, anything missing based on their engagement and what you all have heard with those you've talked to.
Well, just a couple things. So one, Jen, I guess like what happens, I'll ask this on behalf of the group, what happens with the many policy ideas? Because there may be lots of themes that were related to policy, and so maybe just getting it in front of that a little bit. What where does that all go?
Yeah, so a lot of people had I guess I said policies, maybe specific solutions that they were offering, which I think at that phase we were mostly interested in how were you impacted and what did you need. So we still have it, we've captured it, but I think we for the first phase of engagement are more interested in the underlying impacts and needs. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I just wanted to make sure, like, if folks were hearing solutions, I just didn't want to go to a solution round robin. Just know that there was a number that were proposed. And then Jude, just seeing your comment, be explicit around disruption and food access, both getting to the food, availability of food, the distribution and circulation of food throughout the community. Monica, jump in.
Thank you. So when Jenna, when you were reading through the list and it said about the community being concerned about loss of work because of the weather, it's like the weather doesn't care if you have rent to pay. But then neither do the landlords. They don't care either. They're like, we'll figure it out. Like, yeah, you lost 2 weeks of work because of the ice storm, whatever, but we still need our money. And so it's like the status quo still keeping their control. And that is also a decrease in our mental health, that's interconnected because it's like, well, does anybody even care? Like, is it just gonna keep on doing the same thing over and over again? And we're stuck in this system that, just seems it's all about profit and not about, our human well-being. And so, we don't feel prepared. Another thing that you said, we don't feel prepared because we keep on doing the same thing within the system that was created. It's not about taking care of our, like, we're not doing our work as a human race by taking care of our land and our bodies and our community, because we're stuck in the system where it's like we have to go to work to pay the rent to buy the stuff. And it's like we need this unlearning, but also this awareness and this learning of all this stuff, because a lot of people aren't even there yet. And then also with the indoor rec, also like with like moving our bodies and everything is very important, but like having an area where we can learn and build together, and sharing our ideas. But it's needing to realize that doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, is the definition of insanity. And I feel we're in this insane loop of like, oh, let's just do the same solutions that we've been doing with, rent and whatever, and build more housing, and we'll all figure it out. But we're not looking at the health of our ecosystem. We need to build something that's relationship to like productive capital, productive capacity, and the ecosystem health. And so my notes are all over the place. And so it's sorry about this. It's changing our narrative from a human-centered to an earth-centered narrative, which we are Mother Earth and we're all interconnected. And so it starts with micro behavioral recognition and change at the level of individual human, where we don't require this massive ecosomatic consumption in huge amounts to live meaningful lives. So thank you.
Right, that's Monica. So I'll maybe try to distill that, right? If you try to think of a theme just around a more holistic and systems level analysis of kind of all these things that we're seeing, as whether it's disruption, as need, as impact, recognizing it's intimately connected to broader social and economic systems. Anna, you want to jump in?
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to share and just, piggyback a little bit of what Monica was saying. Some discussions that we were having with our youth when we were introducing this survey. Once they read, through the questions and stuff like that. One of them really focused on the economic side, and they asked, like, yes, our parents lose money when there's snowstorms and all that. But one of them did mention, well, what about our mental health? What about our physical health? And how come, there wasn't a lot of questions regarding around that? And that's something that I definitely missed the first time we were having this discussion, but yeah, it was more so that they were worried about their well-being, their future, and the fact that they were extremely terrified. We know that youth, they have all this information on their fingertips with Google, with like all the social media stuff. So that's something that they really brought forward on, like, how are we taking care of our community? Not just the economic side, but also the physical, mental side of our communities.
Yeah, thanks for naming it so explicitly. Gabriella?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute fast enough. Yes, thank you, Anna, for sharing that, and Monica. One of the things that it came up with the families with the survey is they don't have an option but to go to work. And if they don't work, they don't have an income. Most people, undocumented people, have their own business, like lawn care or things like that, that is working outdoors. So during the extreme cold weather, they lose a lot of income and they're unable to pay their rent. So yes, that influences a lot the mental health, the stress for not being able to pay the rent. And also the physical limitations, because just being outside when it's frozen, one, you cannot do the work because there's ice on the grass and everywhere, so they cannot do the work, but also the ice burns their skin. So they mentioned that. And in the extreme weather, when it's too hot, they cannot work. So they have to work smaller shifts, and so it renders less work that they can perform. And also if they have people helping them to do the work, they cannot continue employing them or paying them for the day. So it's a ripple effect to where everybody loses income, and the stress for paying rent, food, and any other security monetary thing that they need, you know, like all of us, but because they rely on their own work. So that's something that was conveyed to me by several families. Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And Jenna, maybe one of the things I'm hearing is just the naming of kind of the compounding and cumulative impacts of these things, right? So you see on some of the themes, financial impacts across hazards, but it's the financial impacts combined with the mental stress that's overlaid, combined with, right? It's that cumulative effect that I'm hearing folks describe really clearly. Tui?
Yeah, hi. So when I did the survey, one of the things that all of those impacts that we noticed here. Also, one of the things that I agree on those impacts. And then one of the things that I asked when I took the survey, that what needed to help with the stress and all of the impact, was the transportation. If we would have transportation, like to go to work and stuff, but I noticed sometimes when we have severe impact and the transportation would reduce. So if we can get more of those needed help, that could help some of the things that to release the impact.
Yeah, thank you.
Transportation needed, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that reflection. Abby?
I think this might just be like a summation, I guess, of many things that Jenna listed, but it stood out to me a lot, just the from our youth discussion specifically. That was the time that I got to be the most interactive with participants, so I'll refer to that the most. But what stands out to me was kind of like the mental load and stress that just goes into having to worry about those things. Like it seems like the most vulnerable populations are the ones who have like the amount of strategies that they were just able to name to like stay cool or stay warm or like get to point A to point B. And it's just a lot of like, I think like what Ben was saying, just kind of like the compounding effect of like the amount of like stress and like mental capacity that has to go towards coping, I guess, compared to just like having no worries to turn on the AC or to turn on the heating unit or to have a car available. Or I guess that just stood out to me from everything that you said.
Yeah, really, thank you for naming that. Tui, is that your old hand or a new hand? That's an old hand. Okay, I can see by your smile that's there it is. Okay. Well, anything else missing? Right, Tui, that was an old hand, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else missing? And of course, you have the kind of report in your, right? They got the report in the packet materials. So if you do see anything else that comes up to you for you, but certainly I think the call out of kind of compounding cumulative, the mental health particular, there's some language around coping, right? And kind of the relationship to day-to-day challenges, just, knowing that you all have really raised that as something that's very explicit. And then I think, Monica, where you started us, just the underlying systems that create differential risk or hazard or impact or trauma or coping, all the stuff, right? That is a kind of underlying systemic challenge. But just if we haven't heard from you, I'd love to bring you in if there's anything else that you feel is missing. Otherwise, we can take a break and we'll just pause to celebrate the good work that you all have done, the work to bring these issues out to community and bring the responses back. So I'll just express my appreciation for the hard work y'all have done. But any last pieces around what's missing before we take a 10-minute break?
I think I can do one real quick, super quick. I did, when I was talking to adults, not the youth, a lot of them did ask if their city and the county work together. That's one question that I was a little iffy about to answer, but that's something that I was also asked by the adults, not the youth.
Okay. Should I be, if you ask that question, Jenna, Amy, you want to just reflect, maybe just reflect back a little bit?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question, and I've heard it in various ways too throughout this project from various people. So yeah, I'll just quickly mention in case it's helpful if you get that question again, but we do coordinate with the cities, the different cities in the county to a certain degree. But as you all may know, like City of Vancouver is way ahead of everybody else in its climate planning, right? Like they made a plan a couple years ago and are now implementing it. Well, we're just starting to plan as the county. So we stay in touch with each other and keep tabs on what's going on and are looking for opportunities to collaborate. But we are in different places. So it's a little bit of yes to a certain degree. But probably there's so much more opportunity than we've accomplished so
I
far.
think I'll hear that as the comment and maybe the question that was being reflected back as seizing the opportunity to understand better and take advantage of the city county working together as effectively as possible. Monica, let's hear from you, and then you'll take us to break.
Awesome. So with the county and the city working together, I actually sent over the comments link over to the named Rebecca Small. She's the one that was on the team for the climate framework for the city, because I want there to be a connection. I want them to see all of what we are talking about and what we see. So just, planting those seeds. But something that I wanted to say from the last event that I put on that was said by community members was to reseed our mindsets and kill the American dream of white picket fences and typical American home. The next one is build buildings greener with plants and animals built with the buildings. Like there's like these homes that go into the, like little like hobbit homes, and like, your animals can like walk over it and stuff like that. That's just one example. And then another human said, money is a poor way to quantify our contribution to the community. Our time shouldn't be just paid in this construct of money when we need to think about how we're actually contributing to clean soil, healthy food, clean water, clean air, mental health, and the unpaid care work of the home, what parents do inside the home from taking care of little humans and themselves. So those are, it's also a part of the economy. So those are the things I just.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Monica. I will note I got a black cat with no tail that climbs all over our house, so maybe we're already a step ahead. So 4:40, let's take 10 minutes. We'll come back at 4:50, and then we're going to move into a conversation around the greenhouse gas sub-element and really think about our next phase of engagement and have you all give some feedback. So come back in 10 minutes. All right, we're at 4:50. 10 minutes goes quick. If I could get a camera on, a thumbs up, a high five, something to let me know that you're back, that is great. And so we're gonna move into a conversation, and as I teed up at the beginning, and thanks for, I see some chat activity, with some offerings, appreciate you all continuing to organize, online here, but as I teed up at the beginning, we're gonna try a different way of getting input from you all on the type of feedback that the project team is really looking for around the greenhouse gas sub-element and policies. And we're gonna ask you, as I talked to many of you before we started this process, and I said, you know, there may be times when not necessarily speaking for your community, but certainly channeling and reflecting and representing your community. And today is one of those. Now, you all have had a chance to be out doing engagement. You're living in and amongst the folks that you're working with. And we're really hoping that today's conversation is going to help us collectively understand how we can most kind of effectively get input that really aligns with the needs of the project and helps advance ultimately policies that will help inform greenhouse gas emission reduction. So Tracy, I'm going to pass it to you and give you the floor to introduce the topic again and how we're going to move through it. And then we're going to have some exercises for us to do as a group to really give some feedback on how we move forward. So, Tracy, I'll pass it to you.
Sure. Thanks. I see Paris's hand is up. Is that a
I think that
remaining
was
hand
on
up, or-
backhand, or was that a question?
There we go. All right.
Yeah, that
Just
was
making
on
sure
back.
before we move on. Okay, well, yeah, so as Ben mentioned, we're going to tee a little bit of stuff up for you for types of questions to be asking about greenhouse gas reductions. And I just wanted to remind everyone that this approach is a little bit different than we've seen with the resilience element, sub-element. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll just remind everyone, this is from our last meeting, but I just want to remind everybody what our approach is going to be for the greenhouse gas emissions reduction sub-element. So as you remember, we started off with the greenhouse gas inventory. We presented that last month at your EJC meeting with all of the emission sources, and that's really done with the goal of highlighting the key emission sources, and those emission sources are where we find the solutions to reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. So our work through identifying measures to reduce emissions is going to be really to target the things that we know that are in those high impact sectors. And it's really based on a lot of science and available technology, and just there's been a lot of work out there to identify what measures have the biggest impact to reduce those emissions. And we always want to keep in mind too, the reason why we're targeting reducing greenhouse gas emissions is because that's what is contributing to all of the hazards, the climate hazards that you talked about in the summary of the engagement, what you've been talking about with your communities so far. So here we're really targeting the source of those climate hazards. So we will be identifying a variety of measures that Clark County could undergo, and then prioritizing them using a multi-criteria framework that will help elevate the importance of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and also the things that are relevant to Clark County, and making sure that those measures that move forward for further analysis are actually relevant to Clark County, and something that Clark County could undertake. So once we get a prioritized list of measures using this multi-criteria analysis, we will work to evaluate those measures. Between our consultant team and the staff at Clark County, we will evaluate the effectiveness of the prioritized measures. That's really calculating the greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and that's and we'll do all of that more technical work. But then what we'll ask EJC to do is help us evaluate the prioritized measures using the equity lens. And this is where we started developing the equity lens in the spring, and now it's going to come back when we are looking at the prioritized measures. And this is also where the input from your communities is the most helpful to us in shaping how these measures are defined for Clark County. So, for example, we know that that adopting electric vehicles is going to show up on the list somehow for an emissions reduction action. It is very likely that that shows up. But how that shows up and the exact approach that's right for Clark County to take, it will be informed greatly by the outreach that you all are doing. And we will be including all the input and the feedback that you're collecting with the write-up of these actions. So that will go hand in hand. It's the best way for us to reflect the community's needs is through guidance on implementation for these greenhouse gas emissions reduction measures. So once we have the prioritized measures and we've fully evaluated them, we will be able to set the emissions reductions targets, and those will be based on each sector. So that's like buildings and energy and transportation. As we remember, those are some of the key sectors. And Clark County is working toward the statewide target of net zero emissions by 2050. And then all of these actions need to get integrated into the larger comp plan. And then it's up to Clark County to track progress, and that'll be through updated greenhouse gas emissions inventory and continued work as they update their regular comprehensive planning process. So I just wanted to remind everyone what the process is going to look like for greenhouse gas emissions reductions. We can go on to the next slide. And this is, so this is an example of how the outreach, the feedback that you're collecting from outreach will make it into the final results. So it is important to keep in mind that Clark County needs to identify the most impactful actions for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and to meet state goals. That is what Clark County is charged with. And it needs to be based on the existing emission sources and science-based opportunities for reductions. Again, that's where we're going back to the greenhouse gas inventory to tell us where those emissions are. But it won't work if they're not customized to Clark County. So this is where the feedback comes in. We'll make sure that we are taking local situations, local context into consideration, bringing in community feedback on barriers to accessing those solutions, and getting feedback on how the strategies will impact communities. And we propose to do that with a couple questions that we think will be helpful to send you out on your engagement journeys, which are on the next slide. So in thinking about a proposed action or strategy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we've compiled these questions that we found to be really helpful in getting good feedback. So how will these strategies impact you? Will they help or harm you? What should we consider as we develop these strategies into policies? and what barriers or opportunities exist to accessing these strategies? What help do you need in accessing them? And so what we've set up for you today is I have an example, and then this is something that we'll work through and we'll test out and make sure that these seem like good questions to be asking, and make any modifications that we need to be making, so that you can have really effective outreach. So, and collect feedback for us that we can incorporate into those actions. So on the next slide, I have an example. So as you're out and about, one of the actions will likely be around promoting bicycling and walking. And in asking these questions to your community, you might get responses like, it's scary to ride next to cars. That's why I don't bike. There are no bike lanes next to my house. It takes too long to get where I need to go because the bike lanes don't connect, and I have to take a really zigzaggy route to be able to be safe. Or I don't have safety gear like a helmet or good lights because when I get off work, it's dark at night for 4 months out of the year. So these are some things that we would expect to receive, and we have received in the past for feedback for a topic like bicycling and walking. And then we would look at those and we would say, okay, these comments fit really well under the strategy that we have identified, that's create a safe, well-connected and attractive bicycle and pedestrian transportation network to encourage active transportation. And then in our write-up of this action, it will include this feedback that community members have identified that these are the barriers to this, for this to be, for their communities to access this infrastructure that Clark County would be developing. So then that input will go in to inform future decisions around how to implement this. Does that make sense to folks? So that's an example, and then so we are going to on the next slide, I think Ben has a little bit more information on this one, on how we're going to get some feedback from you. So the one that we're going to work with is this example greenhouse gas strategy. So we're going to be talking about promoting the adoption of electric vehicles and supportive infrastructure, with individual actions of requiring electric vehicle charging infrastructure in all new and retrofitted buildings, and providing low-income residents subsidies to purchase or lease electric vehicles and bicycles. So this would be a talking point at an outreach event, and then we will go through the activity of practicing talking about this as if you're at an event. And then we'll reflect on those questions. So Ben, do you want to take it from here and provide further instructions?
Yeah, let me ask a question before, so because it's coming up for me and it might come up for others. So the promote adoption of electric vehicles and supportive infrastructure, is that a goal? Is that a strategy? Is that a policy? Like, just there's some naming conventions, or all three strategies?
So when we wrap everything up, right now we are generally going to be talking about actions, but when we wrap everything up, we will end up in the same kind of goal and policy framework as we're seeing with resilience. And so this is presented in kind of that goal and policy framework. The goal would be to promote the adoption of electric vehicles and supportive infrastructure, and then the two below would be the policies.
Right.
So you can see how that kind of aligns with the resilience structure. Individually, as we're talking about them, they're actions that the county can take, and so you'll also just on an individual basis hear us talking about identifying actions.
That's great. Thank you. So just making sure we're using the same language, right? So on the slides, you'll see strategies, and to Tracy's point, those strategies will tend to be, as what we're looking at today in these examples, right? Requiring electric vehicle charging infrastructure, providing low-income residents subsidies, right? So those will be their policies, but their strategies in the context of the slides we're asking. But Anna and Gabriella, you had hands up. Do you have questions? Anna?
Yes, I do have a quick question. So the second one, provide low-income residents subsidies to purchase or lease electric vehicles and bicycles. Do these include undocumented folks? Because I know that we are not allowed to use federal money on undocumented folks.
Well, Tracy, you can.
That would be the sort of feedback that we would be
Okay.
looking to
Thank you.
receive from you.
That's right.
Oftentimes federal support isn't allowed to be used in certain ways, and these are the ways that it would be important to be inclusive.
That's right. So, and before Gabriella and Monica, I'm going to come back to you in a second, but if, Nicole, if you can go to the slide that's giving the directions.
That was my question. Thank you anyways.
Yeah, so let me describe what we're going to ask you all to do, so we don't get into the place that we just did, which is exactly what we want to hear from y'all. So we're going to ask you, we were going to do breakouts, so I'm going to throw that out the window because we don't have that capability. I'm going to ask you to maybe just spend a few minutes by yourself, right? And actually try to test drive or try these questions out. So we're going to ask you to actually answer the questions that we're proposing as you consider that example strategy. And so that's the slide we were just looking at. And the hope is that we're going to learn from you ways to help refine the questions. Particularly, do these questions make sense? How would you reframe them if they don't make sense, right? Like, oh, my community, they wouldn't know that you say strategy. They're like, what is a strategy? Why don't you just say action, right? Like Tracy just did, right? These are actions we could take to make that happen. So those are the type of things that we'll ask. Do these questions make sense? How might you rewrite them or reframe them? Similar to what we've asked you to do electronically previously. Are they easy to understand? When someone in your community be able to easily answer these questions? So this is you all trying to put on your someone else hat as you think about, the folks that you've talked to before. Would they be able to answer these questions? If not, what information would you provide us? And do you need more information to answer these questions, right? So that example, Anna, I think that was you, right? The example is like, well, I would need to know information about who was eligible for subsidies because we talked to a lot of folks who are undocumented, right? So I would want that information ahead of time, so I wouldn't have to answer. I wouldn't be able to give them that information in this context, right? So that's just an example of what we'll be asking you to do. So Nicole, if you go to back to the slide, Monica, Gabriella, I know you both, Gabriella, you were going to ask about the directions. Monica, jump in.
Thank you. With this, well, the first question is, will they help or harm you? And I wanted to add on, or anyone else, or our planet, to actually get a full view of like, well, would this help or harm you? What about anyone you know? Or what
So
about our
Monica,
planet?
Monica, I'm going to interrupt you because I think you're
Right.
doing the exercise.
Oh, I'm doing an exercise and I'm not supposed to, sorry.
No, we're going to wait. We're going to ask you to do it by yourself, and this is
That's what I thought, that's why I was like, wait.
These are
why am I
good.
talking right now?
No, you're jumping the gun, but these are good. It's a good preview, right? That's exactly what we want to hear. Like, is that the question that makes sense for the outreach and engagement that you're doing? And to your point, asking folks how it affect just them is you're already saying, well, we have to ask how would it affect, right, themselves or others or the planet, right? So that's the type of feedback we're going to be eliciting from you all. So let's go to I don't know how to make sure you all can see everything. Why don't we put the questions in the chat? Oh, which they already are, maybe somewhere. Not in my chat. Nicole, can we put the questions in the chat that we're going to ask folks? So these questions. Go to the next slide. So these are the questions that I want you all to take. Let's take 5 minutes. So at 5:15, we'll come back, but we're going to ask. These are the questions we're proposing. So if you were going to go into the community with the examples that we just had and say, how will these strategies impact you? Will they help or harm you? What should we consider as we develop these strategies into policies? Or what barriers or opportunities exist to accessing these strategies? What help do you need accessing them? So that's what we're going to ask you all to think about. So take 5 minutes with those questions. They're in the chat. And then let's show the slide with the example. And you all are going to basically pretend that you're a respondent. Does that make sense? Any questions about what I'm asking you all to do? So you're putting on your community hat, pretending you're a respondent, and then you're going to jump in. Okay? So let's do 5:15. We'll come back, and then I want to hear reflections. Okay? Now I'm going to post questions to everyone for our audience to be able to see the questions that folks are going to reflect on. Make sure everybody sees it. And welcome, Lika, you jumped in right as we're doing an exercise.
Yeah, I saw.
Did
Thank
you
you.
track? Okay, track it. We're gonna come back at about 5:15 and we'll reflect back as a group.
Okay.
Welcome. And welcome, Yolanda.
Thank you so much. I'm traveling, but I'm here.
Okay, perfect. And Jude, I see your question. Tavi, we might be able, can we share the deck with Tavi so I can catch up? And then Jude, you can imagine a different strategy. This was meant to be an example, but those are the same questions we'd be asking. So if there's a specific GHG strategy that you're thinking of, apply those same set of questions. How would it impact you? What should we consider, et cetera? Does that work, Jude? Okay, so as folks continue to kind of answer the questions that were in the chat, Nicole, if you can go to, let's just take a few more minutes. So as you're going through, and thanks for folks adding some of your edits and reflections, and we're going to open this up to the entire group. But I want to have you start thinking through these as well. So there's like, how are we asking the questions? And I see already some edits there. Like, how do we ask this in a way that would get an illicit response? And then really want to have a large group conversation around, do they make sense? And I see some already, how would you reframe? Did you need more information? Were they understandable? Right. And then Lika, I see some of your example. That's the type of response I would expect from asking the question, right? So if you're able to respond in that way, then the question may be framed in a way that that's the type of response you would get. That's a good equity overlay of a potential strategy and a community-minded response. Thank you, Paris. You see your comments. So we'll take 3 more minutes. And just folks, just kind of capture your different thoughts, and then we're going to open it up as a group for either more direct editing and feedback or just open reflection for what's working, what would you need changed. It's kind of a live way to give feedback for folks. Yeah, we'll just take 2 more minutes, and then I'll ask folks to kind of bring your thoughts into the room. And if you've posted thoughts in the chat, I'll ask you to maybe give some rationale for what was coming up for you. Let's take 1 more minute, and then we'll bring everybody back into the conversation. Okay, well, let's bring us back. Folks can keep working on it. And again, for folks that put their comments in the chat, I'd love to ask you also to reflect on some of your rationale, give a little bit of voice to what you put there. And I'll just also just say I appreciate folks' willingness to kind of try this on. It's a different model for what we've used previously. I know we wanted to have some breakout rooms, so that didn't work, but I appreciate folks' flexibility and patience. So Gabriella, why don't you kick us off and lead off the discussion? Thank you.
Thank you. The questions are good. The very first thing I think is, I think there was a program like that. I don't recall if like 10 years ago or so, to where there was an incentive to change V8s, like SUVs and things like that for smaller cars. My question is about federal money for people with IT numbers, that they cannot use federal money for this type of things, like support, financial support. Like the proposal needs to be to where they can also use this incentive to change their vehicles to improve the air quality. That will be one. And the other one is credit score. They usually pay higher credit score for home purchases, cars, or any other loans. I know that for credit cards, they are like 30% interest rate. For homes, 11%. So it pretty much doubles and more than the regular rate. And also to take into account not only the gross income, but what they pay in taxes, because they pay a very high amount in taxes, between 20 to 30% in taxes, that is not accounted against the gross income. And that makes them not qualifying for programs to where they can benefit from changing an old car that pollutes the environment to one that wouldn't do that. So those are the things that come up to me.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Gabrielle, and thanks for sharing it in the way you did. And part of what I hear in your response, as we did earlier, right? And again, the exercise is not to necessarily name all the different policies that we might need to come up with. But what I hear is if I had asked you or someone in your community, what are the barriers that exist to accessing this type of strategy? These are the type of things that you are responding to. And so that, to me, tells me that question will elicit the type of information that's going to be helpful for the program. So we don't make policies that wouldn't be able to work for the communities that are represented around this table. So again, really good example. It's kind of why we wanted you to both answer the questions and think about how we might ask the questions differently. Monica? Yep, it's teamwork. Good
Yes,
job.
it is teamwork. Yes, thank you, Phoebe. When I started off becoming an activist, there was a bunch of words that I didn't understand. And I'm like, oh, like I have to look them up and everything. And so I'm like, keeping it simple is something that I'm trying to do, because I want to make sure that a 6-year-old or somebody, can understand it. And so when I saw the word strategies or policies, I looked up on my phone, what is a strategy? What is a policy? Because it took me a while to get to what a policy was when I was lobbying. I'm like, wait, what are we doing? And so when I looked up what a strategy was, it said it's a general plan. And so, like, how will this general plan impact you was one thing that I thought. And then also policies is, when I looked it up, it's a set of guidelines. And so maybe guidelines are something that's more easily understandable. But one thing that was a question that could be added is like, do any words or sentences or sentence that don't make sense to you? Like, is there anything in here that doesn't make sense? Are the words just too, you're not there yet, which is, not there yet. And so make sure that it's actually easily understandable to people. And so that was one thing that I had for that one. And then asking the number 3 one, it's like, what barriers exist and what opportunities? Maybe making that into 2 separate questions, because first give them a chance to say what barriers exist, and then another one for what opportunities exist. Otherwise, for me, when I was reading it, I was like, oh shoot, okay, which one? And I get overwhelmed really easily. And so I'm like, okay, wait, one task at a time, one thought at a time. And so for me, I think it would be easier to have it, separated. And then with the subsidies, when we talk about the subsidies, I was a part of the Washington State Electric Vehicle Advisory Committee. And I was the one that suggested having a subsidy in the front, like saying like, hey, I would have gotten a better deal if I would have been able to put a down payment on a car. rather than me having to find a loan from a place that, you know, is for low income people, and they were giving me a second chance, and, you know, having to figure that out, and then getting a $9,000 loan, and then making a payment on a used EV that the battery was running down, and so we only had 50 miles to the charge every time. So I mean, I had to make sure that where I needed to go was where I needed to go, but it would have been so much different if I would have had a down payment. And they listened, but when I saw the numbers, it was very low. It was like, oh, here's like $2,000, $2,500 if you're going to buy a car, even if it's used or not. And I'm like, okay, well, are they considering the insurance, the full insurance that you have to pay, which is like $300 to $500? Are they considering the car payment? Like, are they like what are they considering? And it didn't seem like they were looking at it like, I don't think they've ever been poor to know that the rent is like $2,000 a month or more, the insurance, and then the car payment, and then also like what I'm sorry, Gabriella was saying was that the credit scores. It's like, oh, well, you're not in the club yet until you get your credit score up. And so it's like, am I gonna get left behind again like usual? And so making sure that, you know, those are actually attainable. And then so for another one is not going, like, say, yes, we do need to go to, you know, electrifying and everything, but making it so people know that how much goes into making an electric vehicle. But then also like having constant education to like having a question like, would it be beneficial to you if there's education on how to maintain your car, how to maintain the batteries, what do you do to maintain your bike and things of that nature, and then have the education piece of like, hey, yes, electric vehicles, cool, but also a bike uses way less resources to make, and so trying to like make the good holistic choice for you, your family, the health of the community and the planet. So maybe adding that on to also that, like, would education on how to maintain these things be helpful? And then another one is people that don't have carts, like, hey, if I want to carry things, I don't have a bike cart. So is it just going to be electric vehicles, or is it also going to be help with like bike carts and bike locks? Because those also do cost money as well. And so those were my comments. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Monica. Let's go Tui, and then there's some great comments in the chat. So I'm going to call out people that put comments in the chat and make you say it out loud. So just warning you. Tui, please.
Yeah, hi. So to add to the discussion that I have, that these strategies really make sense to me, and I think will make sense to our community also. So the questions I have is, what are the criteria to, you know, to get these strategy in place? Like, is it low income, family size, or the age, the age range for these to be in place financially, you know, because right now I think it's the barrier to get is the price. And another barrier for not getting it is, I heard from many people that the charging the car is an issue. They don't know where to go or what to do, how to charge. So yeah, I agree with Monica. Education is definitely something that we need to, you know, communicate with our communities. And and then another thing is could be, what are the incentives of getting? People are afraid of getting one, but if you throw in some incentives and education them about the climate change, they might not know is important, the impact of it, because they don't know. So if we educate communication with them, then that will be put in a lot of help for these strategies to be in place. And also I have our Vietnamese community also have an announcement that we have an event coming up. The on September 14 is the Mid-Autumn celebration. We also do the, you know, the survey, the engagement for these EJC, you know, communication with them too.
Awesome. Great, thank you, Tui. And building on some themes, I'm going to come to you, Yolanda, and then Danya, you had put in the chat, so I want to bring you in because I think this concept of like more information and education, and you were saying in the chat a little bit about kind of just struggling to survive and why are we having this conversation and helping folks understand why this is the discussion we're having. But Yolanda, jump in, and then Donnie, I want to pull you in. Paris, I want to pull you in. Jude, I'm going to pull you in. So, but Yolanda, please jump in.
Oh, thank you so much. And thanks for giving me grace while I'm traveling this beautiful summer. But Paris, I commend you how you edited those questions, speak health equity. And what I want to add to this dialogue, I'll be short here because I can get very long-winded. But whenever we're talking about something that our communities haven't been privy to, we need to all take a step back and realize that, first of all, the demographics of people who are able to even purchase an electric car, those may not be the demographics of folks that we're going to engage in and educate them on why such a change is needed. We can go on and on about global warming, climate change, but we have to always be mindful. Are we speaking equitable, accessible, representative language? And so know that, we see those Teslas out there. I can tell you very little about them. So we have to be very, very mindful of the demographics that we're speaking to. And we need to start there. And so when we're communicating this, we have to speak at a very, I would say, grassroots level so that no matter what your socioeconomic background is, that you understand it as if you've been in this conversation before. So I will stop there.
Well, thank you, and enjoy your travels. But there's a couple pieces there. So one, I'll just remind folks, and like I see your comment in the chat. I think Jude, you got to some of these pieces as well. This was an example, right, for illustrative purposes. Like the real focus is like, could people actually answer questions as we pose these examples? But Yolanda and some of the other points here are really important to understand is one, just being able to talk to folks around why we're having this conversation, being able to ensure that the type of strategies and policies that we even put forward to talk to community about have some level of relevancy, or that we have enough information to be able to have that conversation, let alone kind of the structure. So let's go. Abby, you jumped your hand in there, and then Paris, I want to come to you. I want to hear kind of, you give some life to what you put in the chat, but Abby, jump in.
Okay, so sorry. I don't want to take away from the people who already put something in the chat because I think it might just echo a little bit of what they said. So I don't know if we want to go there.
Prioritize hand raised and people talking first. So
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. Jump in, Abby.
Okay, I was going to say what stood out to me right away was that when we're talking about things that surround individual action and then also something being promoted by the government, I think it's really important to talk about, be really specific that these are strategies we're promoting and not something that's going to be like enforced, because I think that that can be kind of intimidating to people. And then with that, I think that just like make sure the wording is really clear so that people don't think there's like any sort of like, loss of autonomy, or like there's a lot of people who are like really upset about like overstep. And so I think that just making sure that those things are clear in the wording is important. And then I also what stood out right away is with something like this, like electric vehicles, where cars are such an important thing to so many people. Electric vehicles are kind of like known as not being very cool for like car people. So I think that echoing what somebody else said about like making sure that there's a ton of information about them so that it becomes something that's a little bit more I guess known is the best word I have for it right now. But I think that kind of echoes what other people were saying. But I wanted to start with that autonomy thing for the most part, because I can see that being kind of some pushback with any strategy that involves a lot of like individual action.
Yeah, no, thanks for That's a great point. Let's go Paris, and then Danya, I wanted you to lift up what you put in the chat, and then Jude, I want to come to you, and then Monica, if I don't see more hands, I'll come circle back to you. Paris?
Hey, thanks for calling on me. I had so many words, so I went the chat route, but I have no problem talking on the actual horn.
Yep.
So just to sort of summarize my feedback for y'all, I included in the chat just a generic rewrite of your proposed questions in a version 1, a more generic format, and then a version 2 that laced in the elements of the strategy that you gave as an example, just to sort of model what 2 different ways it could look like. On a surface level, my generic advice for the naming of those questions and what I did with my rewrite was just rewording 2 core words that reappear frequently. So the first is the word strategy, and then the second is the word policies. I think that it could be helpful to translate these questions to community by calling strategies plans and policies rules, just to make it a little more accessible to an everyday person who's not thinking about policies and strategies in the same way that we are. I also included some barriers to consider. We work with an incredibly diverse community here on the corridor. So one of the things, or 4 things to consider: 1, tech comfort. Folks are not comfortable with tech always, and this is even just being on this computer and needing to open a laptop. I have partners at the Plaza at VPS that serve multilingual families, and they do a basic computer skills course that literally includes just powering on a computer. So if community is having trouble feeling confident and even using just a computer, then imagine their discomfort with using a computer car, if you will. Another would be cultural preferences and familiarity. It's really important for our community to feel confident that they can get to work. It's so important that they make their hours, that they know that they've got a reliable option for transportation. And I think that for some communities, there is a sense of lack of reliability for EVs, and that could be a barrier to consider when engaging with community around this topic. And then others are things that my colleagues in the comments have pointed out, like lack of infrastructural space in apartments where a community is majority renting, where they could put those bicycles, or whatever the other transportation, scooters options could be. And then just overwhelmingly an economic fear of the upfront costs and maintenance costs of EVs over their lifetime, being concerns for the community. Let's see if I have anything else that's particularly additive. I think generally speaking, I want to elevate some of the things that Danya and I think it was Madam Bettencourt put out. Yeah, Anna put out. They made some really insightful comments about where community really is at today, and how it's really difficult to have conversations it feels higher up on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs when folks are grappling with day-to-day challenges. And I was just sitting with that question because I think it's a question we ask ourselves a lot when we're doing engagement. It's like, oh, we're going to go ask these folks about green jobs and green infrastructure or insert thing, but they just need to eat tonight. They just need to sleep tonight. And how can you progress and engage in a conversation like that when you're worried about your day-to-day? So I wondered, just a passing thought, like as folks engage with these surveys, it might be that community members' one and only time that they have been asked about their community. So out of all the things they're worried about, they're suddenly being asked about EVs. And I could see that being a mental barrier to engaging with the subject. So perhaps our surveys could somehow honor and highlight the other flavors of work that have been going on, like housing, wealth distribution, all the different healthcare, childcare, all the different types of engagement that does go on, and give them opportunities and point in directions where they could engage in other conversations that are outside of just this environmental subject. Could be a way to acknowledge the very real and pressing urgent issues that community face, while asking them to suspend thoughts about those things and consider this very specific strategy. So I think that's all I have to say. Thank y'all.
Yeah, thank you, Paris. So again, and thanks for referencing some of the folks in the chat. You know, one of the questions, Jude, you had asked a clarifying question kind of early on. I wonder if I can invite you in kind of to restate that. And because I do think it probably matters as folks are thinking through the questions themselves, kind of the methodology that folks are using. And so if you could ask your clarifying question or offer any insights into what does this look like if it's a survey versus a focus group versus a one-on-one interview, but I don't want to speak for you. Yeah,
Well,
there you go.
I think it does matter in terms of whether you're spelling things out or you're actually having a conversation with someone where you can get into the nuance and explain. I just, want to agree with what everyone is saying as well. And my other question was about a pathway. So as you just said, around there's other issues that are like a priority, and then certain communities. So I don't, it's more of a work plan thing to decide, what kinds of questions you're going to ask where, and in a survey, it's really different than another venue. But in terms of electrifying in general, there's a lot of effort around electrifying farms. So if you're a landscaper or some other kind of worker where you're using tools that could be electrified versus gas powered, then there are programs around that, and that might be like a stepping stone. It's like, well, first your chainsaw, or first your whatever tool you're using, or first your shared kitchen, or first your range. I mean, there are other ways to electrify, and so in the context of that, there's a general reason to make these efforts and to consider these alternatives. We have to have a transition, and we have to think about things besides transportation as part of the package of greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And again, the example being illustrative, but certainly generating a lot of response. And part of the test today was to really understand, like, if we gave this type of example and these type of questions, would people be able to speak to them? And it's clear that folks are. Now the plain language, right? Maybe some more information behind it, right? Some education, maybe coupling with, other either policies or subjects or priorities that are more relevant and on top of mind. All of those things, there's great feedback on how do you kind of wrap around greenhouse gas kind of specific sub-element strategies, policies, actions. But it's good to hear folks kind of reflecting back. And I did want to bring in, Danya, you had, there's a lot of chat here. This concept around kind of understanding why, and it's come up a couple times. So Danya, I don't know if you wanted to add to that. Tavi, I think you were naming some of that as well. How do you, talk about it with folks that are with youth, right? So like maybe this doesn't relevant or doesn't resonate with folks, but Tavi or Danya, do you want to give any life to what you put in the chat? Yeah, Danya.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of just really want to share, what I experience and how my engagement is with my community, and really just keep it real, because when I have these conversations, the past few events that I've done, that I've had surveys and had really conversations around the EJC, I get kind of sidetracked because a lot of my community members, like I mentioned, they're more interested to have a conversation with me about what they're going through or what their circumstances. So I've kind of learned to gauge those conversations and really kind of prep them or build them up, and not just like
hey, ask the survey question number 1. I really have to be intentional. And I think that word intentional is key for everything. And all this that we can keep in mind when we're doing all our engagements or asking our questions, like do these questions make sense to me? They do, but to my community members, when I have the conversations, they don't. So I have to almost like not change it, but just kind of first warm them up, build that trust and talk about other things like, okay, how are you doing? What are you going through? And what is this? And then explain to them, well, this is why I'm asking you these questions. This is why this is important. Climate change is important. This is why I'm going to talk to you about EVs. So I think each community is different. I know we cannot do this with all communities because some it'll be a waste of time. But with like communities like mine, I really have to build up, and then unfortunately, sometimes I can't even get to EJC because we get steered off, and then I have to first meet that need first. And then I'll tell them, you know what, we'll have a conversation about this the next time I see you, or I will call you and then I'll ask you these questions because culturally it's just not right at that time. So that's why I'm sharing that. I just want to kind of bring that to light where it's sometimes it is a lot to build up to asking those surveys or having those conversations about climate change and like topics like EV. But yeah, that's what I just wanted to add. Paris, gave perfect examples, and thank you, Paris, for for adding to my comment. But yeah, that's all I have to share. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. And there's a couple of pieces coming up for me. And Tavi, I'd love to have you kind of give a little life to your comment just around working with youth. And Donnie, I think you're naming something, and Jude, maybe you were getting to some of this as well, right? For different populations or different communities, you all may, right, which is part of the reason you've been brought in as experts, right, is to figure out like, how can my community engage in these conversations and recognize, I know we're getting stuck on electric vehicles. There's going to be lots of other topics. People will be like, you want to talk about EVs? And they're like, I don't know what that is. I don't care. I can't drive. I'm 14. But I'd love to talk about this other topic, right? So recognize that when we really look at the full suite of GHG emission strategies, reduction strategies, there will be lots of topics that folks can engage with. And again, this was part of a way to kind of test it. But Tavi, I really appreciated your comments. I just love to give you some voice for it.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. So yeah, the majority of the work that we do, we are heavily involved with folks, kids who are between the ages of 12 and 17. And so far, the ones that have spoken to have expressed, like, why are you even asking me these questions? And what is the importance of this? I can't even drive, or we'll try to mention and try to guide them through the questions that are on the questionnaire too. Like, for example, wildfire smoke and how that affected them. And, they'll just give us a shrug, or they'll be like, I don't remember. That kind of stuff. And I could tell sometimes the youth are kind of just doing it for the incentive, rather than like a genuine answer to give us. So I think that's where we are kind of at a place of limbo, because we want them to know how important this is, especially for their futures, but it's kind of hard for us to engage or get them engaged into the question and answering from a place where they feel like they actually care. And yeah, so it is helpful because we have programs where the students are learning about climate change. So when we talk to the students who go through those programs already, they do give us more of a response to the questionnaires. But to the students that may have not gone through the program, they usually give us really short answers. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to mention.
Yeah. Well, incentives could be powerful, but Tavi, and thank you for saying that. If you have, ways that you might ask those questions, feel free to put those in the chat and we can capture them. Because I think you posed a question that we were really wanting to understand is how can we frame these questions for youth to genuinely care about these topics? And so that could be more information, it could be education, or it could be a different way of asking it. And I think that's some of the feedback we'd like to receive. So Monica and Anna, I'm going to come back to you in a second. Let me see if I can get, I don't think we've heard from Josh or Roz. So I don't know if Josh or Roz, if there's anything you all would like to add, otherwise I'll go. Anna's hand disappeared, but Josh, Roz, anything from you, the two of you?
I have to piggyback on what Danya said. Really, when these questions were posted on the chat, I had to think about it, right? Is this something that my community, is this something that is priority for my community right now? Most of them, I mean, let's talk about financial stability. Most of them are just trying to survive, really working, paycheck to paycheck. And even with that, it's not enough to sustain their, I guess their lives and their families, right? And then two, the accessibility, it's great. We talk about climate change. We, like Pacific Islanders, we come from an island and we see devastations. We see, and this could, for other communities, but I'm talking specifically on Pacific Islanders. I have to say, just last year we had a landslide in one of the islands in Chuuk, right? And that's effects of climate change. The Marshall Islands, their islands are slowly sinking, like not sinking, but it's the water pressure, the water is rising. We've had three, on the island of Saipan and Tinian, we've had three typhoons in the last few years. And so we talk about that with our youth, we talk about that with our community, with our families, and then we come out here and, while we want to focus on climate change, it's different. The climate out here and the living out here is different from back home, right? And then, our focus is not really on our surroundings or our environment. It's really, how do we survive? And so when I think of gas emissions, I think of like, wow, if I'm going to take my, like my sister, for example, if I'm going to take my sister who has 3 children and, I tell her, do you want me to pay for your rent or do you want me to buy you a new car? Buy you a new car that is, electric. It's going to help the environment. She's going to look at me and be like, I'm going to pay for my rent. Pay for my rent for the amount that you're going to down pay for the car. Pay for food, pay for, so I think about all of that. And, you're right. These are conversations we should have. And maybe, something that could be seen in the future, but affordability, for one, I'm thinking of me, right? If my community cannot, I mean, if I cannot afford this, what more my community that I'm trying to help with rental assistance or sustainable living, can they afford this? Or even with the questions like, would they understand what this is about? I mean, so I'm just thinking of all of that, because right now our communities are just surviving. They want to thrive. Oh yes, absolutely. Let's get into a new car where I could just park at Fred Meyer's while I'm shopping. But really, in reality, we know that's not going to happen. These are conversations that we can have. But for me, it would not be a priority for my community.
Yeah, no, thank you for naming it, Roz. Josh, anything to call you in? Is there anything that came up for you?
Well, I think I'll echo most of what's already been shared. I think that there's elements towards our approach that would be much more effective with the clientele and demographics that we're trying to provide services to and make equitable solutions for before we get to this point where we're talking about either subsidized EVs or a mass scaling of EV infrastructure. I think that there's a lot of other solutions that would get us not just closer to our goal and more tangibly closer to our goal, but also would provide a more equitable system of scaling for our clientele. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you've heard variations of what you're saying, Josh, and that might be one of the questions that could be asked. I mean, I think that there is a point to be made that there'll be lots of different options. So I know we're getting centered in on electric vehicles, but there'll be, many different kind of strategies that can lead towards that goal. But that might be a question that, I'm hearing that could be a possible answer, right? Are you not seeing actions here that actually would help you more than what you're seeing on the page, kind of thing? I don't know how to ask that question exactly, but it makes sense. And then Rebecca, I just saw, I don't think we've heard from you either. So can I bring you in? Any thoughts or reflections? Hi, Rebecca. We'll come back to, I'll give you a last call after I go. Let's go, Monica, and then Anna, thanks for your patience. And then Rebecca, if you can hear me, I'm going to call on you again.
Thank you. And I wanted to echo again, like, we're using our energy to survive and not thrive. It's like, okay, well, what's the next thing we need to get in order to keep on the system, keeping on going the way it is? But one of the words that was in the questions with the subsidies, I needed to learn that wording. I was like, what does that mean? And it's a different wording, like helping hand. Like, would a helping hand or help you get, to an e-bike or to an electric vehicle? But I also want to put the education of, like, how much does it cost in the materials and the fossil fuels to make an electric vehicle, and how much does it for an e-bike or a scooter? And so to make people aware, like, how much more energy and materials are used for electric vehicle, and be like, hey, really, if you want to be cool to care, like, make caring cool. An e-bike does way less, for the environment. There's this one Ruby X thing that you can attach to the back of your tire of your bike that makes it into an electric bike. You can take it off and charge it wherever. So there's different things out there that could be more make more sense than creating a whole new electric vehicle. And then also asking, would one e-bike be enough for your family? Because usually how these subsidies work is like one per household. And so would that be enough? Like, would one e-bike be enough for you, your mom, your dad, or whoever you live with, your cousin, your whatever? And really look at the whole family unit and what all they need for an e-bike. So those are the things that I wanted to say.
Well, I appreciate you, Monica, always modeling, even your own need to maybe look up language, right? And it just as a reminder, right? Something like subsidies or policies or strategies may not mean anything. Paris, I think you had said that earlier, right? Can we say this instead of that? That actually makes sense to folks, and not taking for granted language that we use. So thank you for naming it and just, being vulnerable in your own way. I had to look that up. Okay. Anna, jump in.
Yes. So when I was looking at the questions, I just I really got into the whole electric car, but I started creating a list. And I talked about, I put down status, money, charging stations, money to maintain the car, introduction to new tech, language barriers, when needing help. But then it also dawned on me that I feel like we're doing the work backwards. As a Clark County resident, I actually don't accept that answer of, like, the city is ahead of the county, because that shows the work that the county has done has been very limited, and that is unacceptable. One. Two, but it really dawned on me that, like, we need to first and foremost focus on the well-being of our community, the education aspect, and that is how we move forward with surveys, right? We can't ask of our community to talk about electric vehicles without making sure that first of all, they're okay. They're, able to pay their rent, able to pay their bills, able to have a place to be able to keep those things, right? But it also, a key component of this is the education part. What education are we doing prior to even putting out this kind of surveys? And then lastly, after the education process happens, one thing that I really also dawned on me is that, like, my community, it's not a monolith, right? While we are undocumented, a lot of us have DACA, a lot of us have businesses, and a lot of us are also college educated. So we have in my community that, we have people that are ready to go and get those electric vehicles. They just need the support and the programming. But we also have people that are all the way at the back, and they need the well-being, they need the education to be able to participate in something like this. So kind of what I overall just want to say is that it's not one size fits all. We need to meet our people where they're at.
Yeah, I love that. I wonder, Jenna, and Amy and Clark County team, I mean, what this theme around relevancy and meeting folks where they're at and folks that are trying to struggle and survive day to day, and we're trying to talk to them about a climate sub-element to a, land use planning, comprehensive planning kind of process. I guess, is there a pathway? And the answer might be no for this project or with your capacity, but is there a pathway of, what do folks do with that information, right? If folks are like, I can't talk about EVs right now, I'm trying to make rent this month, I need a program for that. So I know that a lot of y'all work with folks and help navigate systems and structures, but I guess I didn't see that in the themes necessarily, although it feels really clear that people are hearing kind of day-to-day life struggle stuff. I guess, what do you have any guidance for the group or any thoughts coming up? And maybe, I'm putting you on the spot, but maybe this can be, we can come back to that and think through, what do y'all do? What do we ask this group to do when, other priority elements of their lives show up when you're even asking about electric vehicles? I don't want to talk about electric vehicles. I need to talk about rent. And it's not about, I want to talk about how I cool my apartment. I want to talk about how I stay in my apartment. So I guess, what do where does that live? And is that, I don't know. I'll leave it at a question.
Yeah. Amy, do you want me to start and then feel free to chime in?
Sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is all I think this is a crux to what we're trying to do, right? It's like the county has this project, right? We want feedback. We want feedback from those who typically don't participate, right, in this type of project. And the reality of this isn't a priority for a lot of people, right? Or some people, right? And I think this is a real challenge, right? So I don't want to, I don't want to gloss over that, right? I think this is a really challenging thing. And I think one of the reasons that we contracted with all of you, right, is because I think our hope is that as a group, we can maybe figure out what are some ways to do this, right? So I have one example off the top of my head. When the first phase of engagement, one of the things Council for the Homeless did, right? I think they were very aware. They adapted all of the questions that they used for in their engagement because they knew they couldn't ask about housing, right? That would come across as being pretty tone deaf when you're talking to people who don't have housing, right? So they adjusted all of their questions to be much more relevant to the population that they're working with. So I think one possible pathway that's just coming to mind, right, is that we can adapt we can work with you all to adapt questions, right? If paying rent, getting to work, buying food, right? Whatever the key concerns are that you hear in your community, let's come up with questions that relate to it, right? We can reframe questions to make them relevant. And I thought this example on EVs was really interesting because I think it could come across, right, as being tone deaf, right? If you're asking people about EVs, and that makes no sense, right? Just given where their priorities are, right? So I think there is there's an opportunity to pick where to focus, right? And I think there's all sorts of strategy, right? Everybody needs transportation, right, of some kind, right? So when we look at a variety of transportation strategies,
we could look at ones that seem like maybe there's more of a connection, right? So anyway, so that's like one possible route. I think some of you all already were saying, like, we actually just need to, there's just other conversation and things that need to happen first, right? And then maybe these questions do make more sense if there's after that other work. So I guess there's I think there's an opportunity to be creative, but it's not easy, right? Like, and so I think I'm just acknowledging the challenge, and it's also really challenging, right? We are doing this project that's tied to legislation that like has some technical components. Like, we still have to do that. So how do we find opportunities to engage with people in a meaningful way, right?
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. I don't know, Amy, if you had anything to add. It's almost the concept of like the bike rack or parking lot or side garden. Where do you put the things that folks have clearly articulated they care about, but might not have a place here? Then the answer might be like it just doesn't weave in really well, and it's part of the responsibility kind of collectively to try to help folks navigate these conversations. And Amy, anything just to add? Because I think it's just come up a number of times, and I just want to make sure that we created a little bit of space for it.
Yes, thank you, Ben, and everyone for sharing. I think one thing that I would just like to note is that we are taking note as we hear this discussion today. We're capturing what you're saying. We will be able to incorporate this into the feedback that we put forward as part of this project. And then when you do your progress reports, when you're out there with your community members, asking and surveying and doing your events, that's a great place to just keep, even if it's the same thing every time, write down that, it was hard to get to these discussions when we have so many other issues that our community is facing right now. So just kind of, put that in your key themes and your progress report. We'll elevate it here through the notes from these kinds of discussions. And then these are the kinds of things that we can bring forward as part of the plan and that are getting it into the plan so that when it comes time for implementation, we're not just starting the conversation there. So it can feel like we are, that it is this difficult, challenging conversation. And the beauty of this, what you all are doing here with the EJC, is we're bringing it to the table now in the planning process, where oftentimes that's not always the case. So hopefully that helps in some form. I know it doesn't resolve the issue, but hopefully that can be helpful as we continue to have these hard conversations.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we're at 6:08, so I'm gonna wrap up this section. I guess fundamentally, there's a few things that I'll just reflect back. I mean, certainly I think there's an opportunity to ensure that, as you all are already doing, right, that you're weaving your way into these conversations, whether it's providing more information or context, or as you said, Danya, like making sure I'm checking in with how you're doing before we leap right into greenhouse gas emission. But some education and ensuring that there's some understanding of the why, right? Why are we having this conversation? How did we get to the discussion that we're having? Certainly hearing very broadly, being intentional about the simplification of language. And there's a lot of ideas in the chat that folks have brought in around how to ask these questions in ways that folks will best understand. And then, of course, contextualizing that ask to some of Jenna's reflections around previous work, asking young people about buying an electric car when they can't drive, or asking houseless folks about their home is problematic at best, right? I also heard a real potential additional question just around other policies or actions that aren't already identified, and giving folks a chance to really speak from their own perspective around what their needs are. So and then there's just much more, that you all provided in the chat in terms of examples. But Amy, I'd love to pass it to you. I mean, fundamentally, I think the test today was, are these questions drafted in a way that would elicit responses from folks and that they could answer, right? And what I observe in the way that you all talked about, and regardless of, the fixation on electric vehicles notwithstanding, right? Because that was the example, and of course, you all honed in on it. But I think what I'm taking away from this conversation that you all just had is that, these are questions that can be answered by community in ways that are really informative, particularly through that equity lens that we collectively worked on. And had really good discussion on, right? You all started identifying some of the barriers, some of the lack of access, some of the ways that any particular policy might be able to be refined or might not actually work for the folks that are in your community. So I just really appreciate the discussion and the thought that was put into y'all's responses. But Amy, do you want to talk a little bit about what's coming next, and then we'll open up for public comment as we start winding down?
Yes, thank you, Ben. So as we move on to the next slide, I just want to highlight some of the engagement work that you've all been doing so far throughout the months of this project, and how the discussion that we just had relates to our continued schedule for public engagement and outreach. And so even though we were just now talking about kind of phase 4 questions and how could we be thinking about those future greenhouse gas related policies and bringing those to our community, we are still in the midst of our phase 2 and 3, just getting started on phase 3 questions. So these are the kinds of things that we will be able to work with you as you think about what's important to your community and how we might adapt things. So as I briefly review these 4 phases of our engagement, just keep in mind that these are the things that we're aiming for. We know that we've had to adjust the timeline on these as we try to keep up with the pace of the project, and just make sure that we respond to the community the best we can. So if these timeframes don't work for you or your organization, we're happy to meet with you and work through that and figure out what would work. And so you'll just want to keep in touch with me and Lauren and Jenna so that we can help you with any questions or challenges that come up. So the phase 1 engagement, I think we all are familiar enough with that phase that we know that we're wrapping this one up. And we just want to ask for people to get in their final data and progress reports on phase 1 related questions if you used them. And then moving into phase 2, this survey has been out since June, or the end of June, early July. And so this is to get the broader public's input on resiliency draft goals and policy ideas. This phase is currently underway, and I know many of you are already using that survey, and our goal would be to wrap this engagement up in August or by the end of August. As we move into phase 3 engagement, which is to start to look at the criteria for greenhouse gas policy development, this will be through July through the end of September is what we're striving for. And so those phase 3 questions are just now available. You should have received an email last Friday from Jenna with the Word versions attached, and then a link to the translated versions that are in Word and online via SurveyMonkey on the website. If you need that link, just email me and I'll make sure you get it. But those are now available, and we are just waiting for any other edits or feedback some of you might have on the translated versions. Our Word version really can't be edited much at this point because we've already translated everything, but if there are edits to make the translated versions of the phase 3 survey more understandable, please get those to us by August 12th. And then, as we've mentioned, we encourage you to use these questions as they make sense for your community, and then we are happy to help you come up with ways that you can either shorten the questions, modify the questions that make them make the most sense for your community, to turn them into discussion questions if that would help serve you with a focus group, or these more impromptu conversations where you are going to be sitting down more one-on-one with individuals. So let us know if you need help with any of those pieces. And then, like I mentioned, we're hoping to wrap up phase 3 by the end of September. Again, these are our goals. So reach out if any of these are causing like stress or worry with anything. And then phase 4 is where this is kind of where our discussion was today on thinking about what should the phase 4 questions be about. This is the focus on draft greenhouse gas reduction policies and goals. And so thank you for the conversation today. We did take note. We will be looking at the questions that we have in draft and revising them based on this feedback, based on these this input that you shared with us today. And we hope to have a final version of the English available for use in late August or early September. And then we'll wrap up that engagement before the December EJC meeting on December 2nd. I know that sounds like a ways away, but it will probably be here before we know it. So there's still time for us to be thinking about these phase 4 questions before we finalize those. And we just really want to thank all of you for all of your work to date. It's been a lot, and we're learning a lot through you, and we're informing this plan even more because of your engagement with your communities. So again, just note we're roughly aiming for these timeframes, and to reach out to us with any questions that you have or challenges if the timeline doesn't quite fit for you. So we'll be here to help work out a plan.
Great, thanks, Amy. And don't say that December's going to be here soon. I'm not ready for that. Gabriella, did you have a question?
Yeah, don't say this. I just share something about that. Like, I'll just throw some candy out of the window, out of the door, toss a turkey in the oven and wrap a gift, and that was the end of the year. So I just share something like that actually this week. Yes, I'm still working on the translation because we had all those responses. So thank you for being so patient, but I promise I'll get that back to you.
Right.
And I would love to have the SurveyMonkey links that works best for us. That will be awesome in Spanish and English. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. And then, of course, reach out to the project team, Clark County folks, if for those type of asks. Hopefully y'all know where to go at this point. Let me pause before we move to closing. I do want to do a call for, if we go to the public comment slide, we're going to move into that portion of our agenda. So this is a space that we create at every EJC meeting. I think we have a limited number of folks in the audience, but if you are in the audience would like to provide public comment, you can raise your hand, which is an icon at the bottom of your screen, or *9 if you're on the phone. And then we'll promote you, and you can offer up to 3 minutes of input to the group. So it looks like just Clara in the audience. So Clara, I'll look to you if you want to provide input. Otherwise, I'll do a last call for public comment for our EJC meeting for tonight's purposes. Not seeing any hands raised. We will move to close out our public comment period and move to closing. So I think, Tracy, you were going to walk us through an upcoming schedule, correct?
Yes. Okay. So alongside the engagement schedule that Amy just went over, we wanted to update you with what we expect to see for our meetings. So this is set up by month. You can see here EJC is on the top, and then we also wanted to show you just how the meetings are going to interact with the CAG as well, the Community Advisory Group that is also meeting, and we do have a couple members on this group represented there too. This is August. We've had our outreach discussion. As Jenna mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, September is going to be a break. That's when we're going to start hearing from the community advisory group. We're going to start collecting some input on some of the key sectors that we identified in the greenhouse gas inventory. We'll talk about consumption and waste and, this month in August, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, with the community advisory group, we'll be talking about buildings and energy, and then a prioritization framework to make sure that we're focusing on the most important strategies for strategies and actions for greenhouse gas emissions reduction for Clark County. In September, there's no meeting for EJC, and the community advisory group is going to continue on the sectors, talking about consumption and waste, the things we buy, the things we throw away, and transportation, and then other categories of emissions. When this group comes back together in October, we're going to review the work with those sectors in mind and get more feedback from you on starting with buildings and energy and transportation. And then in November, we'll talk about consumption, waste, and other categories. That's when we're going to be bringing back the equity lens, and we'll start to ask for some of that feedback that you're getting from community and you as representative of the communities that you engage with as well. There in November and December, the community advisory group will be on break, and we will mainly be focusing on that equity lens here in the EJC. In January, we are going to see the results of the emissions reduction calculations that the technical team is going to be putting together. And so we'll be talking about goals and targets for emissions reductions. And then we'll also bring back a refresher on the resilience goals and policies. And we'll do that for both EJC and community advisory group in January. Then February will be the last meeting for this group, and that'll be an opportunity to provide final recommendations for the community advisory group to consider. They'll consider those in February and then provide their final recommendations on both sub-elements in March. So that's kind of an overview of how we expect the upcoming meetings to happen. It's an update from what we presented to you early on in the project. We're kind of refining as we're going, and we've laid this out as an update to how we expect to approach the greenhouse gas emissions reduction sub-element, and also bring resiliency back into the conversation to be able to wrap up those conversations as your contracts are wrapping up with Clark County.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy. Any immediate questions for today on the schedule? Okay. Awesome. Jenna, any last thoughts? Or Monica?
So one thing that got brought up at the CAG was that there's like a big gap in between the last meeting that the CAG has and the EJC has to what it is going to be presented in front of the county council. And so I just wanted to advocate for everyone to like attend your planning commission meetings and attend the Clark County meetings to make sure that this is something that they hear, that we want to get done, and make sure that the community knows that we need all hands on deck to make sure that this policy doesn't get watered down, and that we can make sure that what we, all of us, want can still remain, because it's going to go into from our hands to the CAG and then to the planning commission, and I don't know of any more, but like, I want to make sure that, we just don't let any of our, important issues and important things that matter to us, go away, throughout the thing, whatever the tube, I don't know how to call it. Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to make that, note. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. Jenna?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, just building off of Monica's comment, that I think before we wrap up, the process with you all, we'll make sure to talk about the rest of the process and getting the recommendations that come out of this through the finish line. So we'll make sure to talk about that, build that in before we wrap up with all of you early next year.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, if that's it, I'm gonna appreciate everyone. It's 6:25 on a Monday afternoon. We don't show up in September. I guess there won't be a link, but you can show up wherever you want, I guess, from 3:30 to 6:30 in September, but it won't be with us. Just reviewing work plans for the next several months. Make sure you're connecting with the team if you have any questions, any needs, to help get your work done, get paid, submit your invoice. And with that, we'll send you on the way. I really appreciate folks' flexibility today. I know we wanted to have some small group conversations, but it was great hearing from everyone. Tui, it was awesome to have you. Give Min our best if you talk to him, but otherwise, just much love, everybody. Appreciate you, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye,
Take
everyone.
care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Safe travels, Yolanda. Bye.